Senate will please come to order. We would like to recognize the senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. As predicted, we do not have action from the House, but we do have something on our notice calendar. Senators looking at the calendar will see H55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments. I would move at this time that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take off the notice calendar H55 for immediate action.
The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments, in order to, like I said, take up for immediate consideration. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H55 appearing on the notice calendar. With that, we have a House proposal of amendment, is my understanding, on H55. And so the pending question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on H55? Are you ready for the question? If someone wants to speak to it, Senator from Windsor.
I would love to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. President.
You bet. There's no automatic recognition here on this.
So I am reminded, I apologize. As the reporter for H55, it is my pleasure to stand up and say that the House did very little to change our bill. We had a very strong vote in this body. I'd just like to take a minute to remind you, because it's been a while since we dealt with H55. As passed from this committee, this bill marries 6 of the bills that we have cared quite a bit about, and all of which are related to labor and employment issues. It creates the Baby Bond Trust, and it creates the Baby Bond Trust. So it's one bill with many issues. H55 provides, it's an additional piece of our natural disaster support for our employers. It provides relief for employers with unemployment insurance experience rating after natural disasters. It takes it from 4 weeks to 10 weeks because it's very hard for some businesses to get up and running again in 4 weeks. So it protects our employers from having their experience rating negatively impacted. It protects recipients of unemployment insurance who are not at fault in causing an overpayment of unemployment insurance benefits. It adds additional penalties for deliberate UI fraud, and it makes technical corrections in unemployment insurance and workers' compensation statutes, which should have made it into the technical corrections bill, but we're a little late. It provides workers' compensation coverage for some state employees recovering from PTSD, and it continues our work collecting data on Vermont firefighter cancer rates, and it subsidizes to the tune of $1 million, which we passed in the budget and is already law, the cost of early detection cancer screening for our firefighters. And this is getting quite a bit of notice and excitement from our communities. I've had 2 people actually mention it to me already, which is great. It makes technical corrections to Vermont's parental and family leave law to make it consistent with the federal law. This is basically the federal law. And it sets up the Baby Bond Trust in statute. It does not fund it, but it sets it up so that the treasurer can go forward working on it, getting it ready, and in whatever capacity he wishes, raising money for it. So that is what this bill does. And the House made 2 changes, and our committee was okay with them. It deleted the Section 5, which would have increased the penalties for unemployment insurance fraud. And the reason they did that is that they didn't feel they had the time, given when they got the bill, to deal with it as fully as they would like. They're interested in it, but they would like more time to deal with that. And they also deleted Section 20, which extended veggie until 2027 because it was already taken care of in H10. So those are the 2 things it did. We are, as a committee, are supportive of those, and we would ask for you to concur with the House's proposal of amendment. Thank you.
So the question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on H 55? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of those bills about which I have very mixed feelings. It contains, as often in omnibus-type bills, some things that are very, very, very good. And it contains a couple things that I think are pretty bad. Let's talk about the bad for a second. The two bad things that I see in the bill from my perspective, first of all, is the addition of the baby bonds language. I look at the baby bonds as it was described to us initially by the treasurer with funding as a mechanism to provide money for babies set aside, monies that would, for all intents and purposes, be taken from the general fund. Because what that money that would be used for that purpose involved money that was funds that were lost, unrecovered funds, funds that were abandoned. And those funds typically go to the general fund. And if they're used for that purpose, they then become diverted from the general fund. And they are for a certain group of employees as opposed to people rather than all babies. And that determination is made on the basis of the income level of the parents for money that is going to be used 20 or 21 years later at that time. I find that, frankly, to be discriminatory. I find it to be discriminatory because it is, in effect, taking away money from people right now who are taxpayers and using it for a certain subgroup of people that are arbitrarily determined as far as the future. If we were to set up a baby bond program that affected all babies in Vermont, I'd be all for it. I don't like this separation the way it's done in this, what I believe is a discriminatory fashion. So that's problem one. The second issue we have the payment. There's some very good things in this bill. So the firefighter cancer issue is, I think, of major importance, and it's one that we definitely should look at. And certainly the issue of providing workers' compensation coverage for all people who do essentially the same job. And in the situation that we have right now, we're treating people differently. And some we're allowing a presumption of PTSD, and it's the state's responsibility to decide otherwise. And for other people performing essentially the same kinds of jobs, we're treating them entirely differently. I don't think that's fair. That, I think, is in fact a very good thing. We have, though, another situation in this bill which I don't think is entirely fair or entirely right. I won't go into infinitesimal detail at this point to say, on balance, I have to come back to what makes the most sense, as we often have to do as legislators, and that is to decide, does the good outweigh the bad? The bad piece that I was going to mention, I'll just mention it very briefly, is the issue of fraud. I know I've spoken about this before, of workers' comp fraud, that is something that you can do, unemployment fraud rather than unemployment fraud. Unemployment fraud is penalty-free right now in Vermont. If you take the period, and I think we took a 10-year period in which we were able to measure, it was something like 2010, 2019, there was some $55 million in unemployment fraud or payments that did not appear to be proper or appropriate. Improper payments is the term that's used. And they're penalty-free. We finally established in a bill that we would penalize fraud for what it is. And we saw during the pandemic how many folks, how many cases of fraud that we had. And now we've taken that out, and again, it's still free. So you're still free to steal from the unemployment fund without penalty, criminal or civil. And I think that's wrong, and that's a problem. On balance, though, as I look at this, and I look at the firefighter situation, I look at the fairness for workers' comp, the balance, to me, shifts to the good. And I will vote in favor of the bill despite my concerns, but I hope that those of us who are back in January do something about the other things that I mentioned. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on H55? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have voted to concur with the House proposal of amendment on H55. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask that at this time the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the action just taken on H55 to the House forthwith.
Now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to message your actions taken on H55 and accolade and miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments to the House forthwith. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. That completes, unfortunately, the amount of work we have before us until we hear again from the House. So I would ask that the Senate, pending announcements, stand in adjournment until 12 noon. Oh, I'm sorry, in recess.
We were just discussing that possibility.
And if I might go first with the announcement.
Sure, Senator from Chittenden Central.
I would ask that as we go forward in the day, it becomes easier and easier to drift away from the immediacy and the urgency of what's going on here. So I would very much appreciate if we're due to be back at 12, if everybody's here a few minutes before. I always need to check in with, for instance, the original presenters of bills, chairs of committees of jurisdiction, make sure all the votes are in place. So if we're coming back at noon, if folks could be getting to the chamber at 5 of, that would help rather than 5 after. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved pending announcements. Are there any other announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand in recess until noon. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess until noon.